Hello and welcome everybody. Happy Friday. We have made it to the end of another week and we're here ready to go with another webinar. Today, we're going to be continuing the Subsector Spotlight series that we began last week. Last week, we talked about semiconductors, how important they are, not just to cell phones or to cars, but to any industry that uses technology. So today, I wanted to talk about one of those industries that is one of the largest users of semiconductors. Many industries have been established. Automotive industry. Cars are not a new idea. They've been around for over 100 years, and unless we invent flying cars for whatever reason, the automotive industry will be here for another 100 to come. But some industries, such as information technology, as well as other more 21st century technology industries, have been emerging and growing, and some of them are underrepresented. There's not enough conversation about what they are and about that industry than it deserves. So today I wanted to take a look at one of those sectors. It doesn't have as much information as semiconductors. It's not as hot of a topic, but it is an incredibly fast-growing industry. This past week, it was one of the two top growing subsectors overall, if we take a look at FinViz. And also, it's a sector or subsector that I find a lot of interest in, and I hope you do as well, because everything is moving this direction, and it benefits us to know what's going on so that we can get in and get involved. So today's topic is all about the consumer electronics subsector. Again, it's not going to be like last week. We're not going to be able to go through and show 10 different ETFs that trade this one subsector or industry. Instead, we're just going to talk a little bit more about the subsector itself, but again, bring it all back to the most important question, why you should care. Without any further ado, let's say hello to everyone we have with us live, and then we'll get right into the presentation. Hello to Blaze, Lucia, Gloria, Yara, Andrew, Kike, Juan, Elizabeth, Maida, my mom. Kira, Nidia, Magnolia, Danny, Jacqueline, Miguel, Marta, Mabel, Chela, Sunshine, Leticia, and everyone else. Thank you all so much for being here with us live. Again, if you're watching these videos recorded, we do these webinars live every Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. So please come join us, say hi, and join in on the conversation and the fun. So like I said before, today's conversation is all about the consumer electronics subsector. Before we go anywhere, the usual disclaimer, I'm going to talk about some different finance stuff. I'm going to mention some companies. Don't take it as investment advice. We're here for educational purposes and educational purposes alone. So, what is consumer electronics? Because that word is weird. When we think of electronics, we think of the technology and we think of how the technology works with the internet. But consumer electronics is slightly different. With that said, it is still one of the largest industries by market capitalization as a result of some of the companies that are a part of this subsector. And just in case we aren't familiar or we want a refresher about what the word market capitalization, or abbreviated market cap, is. Market cap is, if we took, for example, Apple, and took all of the shares of Apple and then multiplied the shares by the price per share. So it's the value of that company in the market. Quite literally, the number of shares times the price of the share is the value. So market capitalization is how we decide exactly what companies rank where. It's usually the best way to do it. Some companies earn a lot of money. They profit a lot. Others don't. For example, Apple is a $1 trillion company. But Tesla is a company that until last year was losing money every single quarter and every single year. But does that mean that Apple is far more successful of a company than Tesla? Well, we're comparing apples and oranges there. With market capitalization, we don't care about how much did they profit, because profit's misleading. And we'll get into that in a future webinar. But for today, we're going to look at some of the largest companies in this industry. But market capitalization is a term that I wanted to just talk about in a little bit more detail because it's so pervasive. It's everywhere. The S&P 500 is market cap weighted. Many indexes we look at are market cap weighted. The bigger your company is, the bigger the value of that company, the bigger a piece of the pie you will have. If we wanted to look at the market capitalization of the consumer electronics industry, just in 2019 in the US, we saw an increase of $301 billion US dollars. And that's in the US alone. We'll get into in a little bit how that's almost misleading when we're looking at the consumer electronics industry, because the US isn't everything. And for some industries, while the US is the king, Asia is the king when it comes to consumer electronics companies, manufacturing, and distribution. So today, let's focus on the basics. What the subsector is, key companies within it, and then most importantly, why you should care. Let's first start off with the companies, so we know who exactly we're talking about here. So I apologize, this should not say semiconductor, this should say consumer electronics. But these are the companies that we're going to be talking about when we say consumer electronics. And this list I'm providing is only publicly traded companies in the US. These are companies that if you go to your broker and say, hey, buy me shares of this company, they will. So we're talking about Apple, GoPro, LG, Sonos, Sony, and Vizio. Now, what do all of these companies have in common? Because Apple, you think cell phones and computers. GoPros, you think cameras. LG, you think TVs or your fridge. Sony, you probably think TVs, but also cameras. Vizio, TVs. Sonos, audio. There's not just one thing. It's not just semiconductors. It's not just cars. We're talking cars. We're talking cameras. We're talking all of this kind of stuff. Hi, Chelly. It's great to see you, and thank you for being here with us live. So what do all of these companies have in common if they are so diverse? Well, consumer electronics, the answer is in the name. They are companies that produce electronic goods for consumers. Of course. But these companies tend to focus on the product side of things as opposed to the computing components or the information technology side of it. Yes, many of these companies use some crazy technology. Many of these companies include companies that do vertical integration and create their own chips and do all of their manufacturing in-house. But the main difference here is that these companies tend to produce physical products that leverage technology. They don't really produce the technology itself. They just use the technology to do something with it. Now, with what we've talked about so far, I have a question for all of you. Audience participation time. Woohoo! Is Microsoft a consumer electronics company? Yes, no, and why do you think that? While we are having some people answer that, I do want to remind you all that today is the last day to sign up for the Spreadsheets Made Simpler webinar series. If you're interested to sign up for the Spreadsheets Made Simpler series, the link is in chat right. Oh, that is a YouTube link. That is not a Zoom link. Second verse, hopefully better than the first. Let's try this link. Hey, that looks like a sign up link. All right. So, if you're interested to sign up there, I'll cover it a little bit more at the end of today's webinar. But for right now, is Microsoft a consumer electronics company? There is no right answer, so I will give you my opinion here. No, it is not. Many people are saying yes. I would say about 80% of people are saying yes. About 20% are saying no. But Microsoft is technically an information technology company. They produce software. Yes, they make computers. Yes, they make phones. And if you've ever bought a Microsoft phone, you'd realize that they should probably stick to making computers. Their focus is on the digital side of things. It is meant to be a company focused on software, focused on information technology or IT. It's not a consumer electronics company. We don't see Microsoft making televisions. We don't see Microsoft making speakers. Well, they made one, and I'll tell you what, I bought it. It wasn't good. It really wasn't good. So Microsoft, they focus on the technology side of things, and then they let other people handle the hardware manufacturing. That's where other companies come in. But Microsoft is software. And of course, that's my opinion. Let's see what FinViz has to say. If we go here and we look up Microsoft, we'll see right here that Microsoft is considered to be a software infrastructure company. Elizabeth saying, don't they make tablets and computers? Yes, but that's like saying that Ferrari is a tractor company because they make a tractor. If you don't believe me, Ferrari is actually a tractor manufacturer. You can go out and you can buy a Ferrari tractor. But that doesn't make Ferrari a tractor company. It just means that they've manufactured one. Microsoft has made phones. Microsoft has made laptops, but they focus, and their majority of their revenue is on the software side of things. And that's where their what's called core competency is. That's why we don't buy a computer because it's a Microsoft computer. So we buy it because the software is good. But again, according to FinViz, Microsoft is a software company. In my opinion, I agree. Now, if Microsoft is not a consumer electronics company, is Apple? Again, another good question for you all. Is Apple a consumer electronics company? What do you all think? Because this one is tricky. It's hard to answer because when you think about it, Apple is very similar to Microsoft. They both make software. They both create products for their software. But Apple does a lot more than just creating software. They create smartwatches. They create cameras, not like standalone shooting cameras, but the cameras in their phones are a huge selling point. They bought Beats by Dre so that they could get into the speaker and home audio manufacturing business. Are they only a consumer electronics company? Not really. But is Apple a consumer electronics? Could Apple be considered a consumer electronics company? No doubt in my mind. And let's see what good old FinViz has to say. Just so everyone knows why I'm talking here about FinViz. For Sectors Made Simple, we do a lot with sectors. Surprise, surprise. All of our sector data we pull from FinViz. All of our industry data we pull from FinViz. So if FinViz classifies something as a healthcare sector, as an industrial sector, that is what Sectors Made Simple data will show. So it means a little bit to us when we look at what FinViz says Apple would be for industry. So with that said, we see right here, if we move our box over, which I can't do, Apple is a consumer electronics company. Again, they do manufacture software, but they manufacture a lot of hardware as well. Laptops, phones, speakers, any sort of Beats audio that you buy. If it's bought in the last 4 or 5 years, it's Apple. Yes, it's Beats by Dre. But Apple owns Beats by Dre. They bought them because they wanted to get into the what's called high fidelity or the high quality audio market. So with all of this confusion, not so much confusion, but a lot of this kind of back and forth of what is and isn't consumer electronics, let's break it down a little bit and just, instead of just talking about what makes these companies similar, let's talk about what products make them similar, because the products are what makes a consumer electronics. So here, let's take a look at what companies we're sure are consumer electronics, and then talk about what they do. We have Sonos, which is a speaker manufacturer. We have Vizio, which are TVs. LG, which makes TVs and appliances. They'll make your fridge, they'll make your dishwasher, your washing machine, but also for some reason your television. We have GoPro, which is a camera manufacturer. And then we have Sony, who manufactures cameras, TVs, also speakers. And they also manufacture some gaming consoles. But those, we're going to have a complete other day on the Xbox and PlayStation and all of that. For today, let's just focus on the consumer electronics side of things here. The consumer electronics products will include companies that manufacture things like cameras, TVs, but also what is called smart household appliances. what that really is are things in our house that are connected to the internet or are smart. They can think. It's pretty wild, but we'll get into some examples here in a couple minutes. In recent years, this industry has also started to expand companies that don't just manufacture fridges, but it's allowed companies that manufacture fridges to get into the technology market by creating things like smart devices, some refrigerators. I kid you not. There's a refrigerator that will take a picture of the inside of your fridge, list out all of the things that you have in your fridge, so when you're at the store, you can ask your fridge, "Do I have milk?" And the fridge will answer, "Yes, you still have milk." "Do we have eggs?" "We're out of eggs." The fridge can literally tell you if you're out of milk while you're in the middle of the store. It's ridiculous. Another one that I've seen, the fridge has a little screen, and the screen sends you a picture or shows you a picture of what's inside the fridge. So you don't need to open it to know, do I still have juice? It's just there. So all in all, consumer electronics, while it's not home to many new companies, it is a very new industry that as more and more products and appliances move to this, what's called Internet of Things or IoT devices, we'll continue to see this consumer electronics sector, subsector continue to grow and include way more companies. Will it tell you if the milk is spoiled? I wish. Hey, fridge, can you smell this for me? Does this smell right? I need a fridge like that, I'll tell you that much. I am so bad about telling if the milk's gone bad. Anyway, let's talk about IoT or Internet of Things. Because really, this is why more and more companies are getting into the consumer electronics market. IoT is the bridge between the physical world and the digital world. We're not talking cell phones here. Cell phones have always been our connection. But IoT is different because it's not just a cell phone. It's other things that allow us to connect via the internet to applications or devices and talk to them and do something with them through different platforms such as smart assistants. There are 3 major smart assistants that I will talk about, and there are way more than that, but the 3 big ones are Alexa by Amazon, Siri by Apple, love her or hate her, and Google Assistant by Microsoft. I'm kidding, Google. These 3 are incredible because not only can they answer basic questions like, "Hey Google, what's the capital of France?"
Paris is the capital of France.
Not only can they answer dumb questions that I could Google myself, but it can also do other things like, "Hey Google, turn on the television."
Sure, turning the living room TV on.
My TV is smart home enabled. It is part of an Internet of Things. I can go ahead and turn on my television just by talking to a device. I can turn on the lights in my bedroom. You can do an incredible amount of things with very basic components. Or, this is probably my favorite one, I can turn on my oven. My oven has Wi-Fi, so I can go onto my phone and turn on my oven before I'm even home. So That's why we're seeing this consumer electronics sector grow so quickly, is that we are in a world that we want technology. We want it to be all around us so that it makes our lives easier. Smart assistants like Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant have allowed us to start to use all of these smart devices, all of these consumer electronics in a much simpler way, where it's no longer crazy technology that takes hours and days to set up. It can be done in minutes. These consumer electronics companies are trying to get involved with this, and they will tend to have products that are IoT enabled. For example, fridges, microwaves, ovens. Even I have a smoker in the backyard, and I have an app that lets me connect to it. And I can tell this thing, I'm not going to say its name, otherwise it's going to try and turn itself on, but I can tell that thing, hey, turn on the smoker. Turn it on to 145 degrees. Set a 1-hour timer. So it's technology that's becoming more and more available, not just in things like your speakers, not just in things like your fridge, but in everything. Whether you realize it or not, IoT is becoming just something that's expected in technology. With that said, just because someone or something is now IoT enabled doesn't make it a consumer electronics thing. It still is considered to be, IoT is still considered to be internet or telecommunications. Very rarely do you see an IoT company, first off, go public, because usually they license the technology or they get bought out. IoT stands for Internet of Things. So IoT devices, they're pretty universal, but just because a company makes something that is IoT connected doesn't mean it's internet or doesn't mean it's consumer electronics. Here's the reality. If we don't care about any of the other stuff, all we care about is consumer electronics. It's not that big. There's about, let's say, 25 to 30 companies in the entire New York Stock Exchange that you could really say are consumer electronics only. So, yes, there are not nearly as many companies, and they're not nearly as self-explanatory as other things such as computer hardware, semiconductors, or IT, information technology companies. But the reason that we're even having this webinar today is because it is a rapidly growing industry. It has been performing extremely well in the past year, and in the past week, with the rise of technology as a sector overall, consumer electronics is the top sector within technology, but is the second strongest sector overall behind coal. And I'll tell you what, consumer electronics is a little bit more fun of a webinar to do than coal, I'll tell you that much. And it's also one that is going to continue growing. The Internet of Things and the consumer electronics industry is only getting bigger as the technology gets cheaper. The support for the technology becomes more available, and our demand for these products continues to go up. We spoke before about how IoT is in the couple hundred of billions of dollars in the US. That's expected to grow to $1.5 trillion worldwide by 2027. It is expected to grow at a rate of 8 to 10% per year. Elizabeth, that is a great question, and I promise I'll answer that here in a couple of seconds. So, again, that's 6 years from now. Looking back 6 years, if you told me at 19 that I would be doing educational webinars for finance, I would say, but I want to go into the music industry. A lot can change in 6 years. So we have no idea if things will continue to grow at the rate they are. It may speed up, it may slow down. But right now, just to show you where the money's at today, audio and video equipment, speakers and cameras make up over 60% of the market share of consumer electronics. Will IoT go public one day? I doubt it. So the main thing with IoT and the reason it's so valuable is that one company does not own it. What companies will do is they will say, hey, LG, Panasonic, Sony, Vizio, here is our smart assistant. Here is our Google Assistant. If you want to, you can create programs for it. Here's the way that you can give it information, and you can program it what to respond with. So IoT does not belong to a single company. It's this big idea of one piece of technology communicating with the real world via some middleman. Those middlemen are very standard. Apple, Amazon. So let's say this. Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant are the three big ones. And they can connect to many things. I can turn on my Roomba. I can turn on the oven. I can turn on the vent above my stove. I can also find my phone. I can lock my house. I can lock my house. So it really allows you to do so many things that is not just technology itself. It's very much the connection between the physical world and the digital world. And no one company owns that yet. I will say yet. We have no idea where it's going to go from here. But as of today, there are many companies that are involved in the market. And the market's more than just the United States. Consumer electronics is a truly global industry. Many of the major consumer electronics manufacturers, and this goes to Elizabeth's question, who are the leading companies in consumer electronics? Many of them are not even in the US. Companies such as Nikon, Panasonic, Toshiba, and Fujitsu are all publicly traded, but are not publicly traded in the United States. So with that, it's fascinating because while these companies aren't publicly traded in the US, that doesn't mean that they're not huge players and that you can't buy their products in the US. I'm assuming that everyone here has heard of Panasonic or Toshiba. If you're into cameras, you may have heard of Nikon and Fujitsu as well. These are massive companies that these four right there are all part of the 10 largest consumer electronics companies in the world. Alongside them are others that we've already talked about, such as Sony, LG, as well as Apple. But just because they're not in the US doesn't mean you can't invest in them. It is possible to invest in some of these foreign companies through the use of foreign brokers as well as other sorts of ETFs that invest in foreign markets, such as the emerging markets ETFs from MSCI. They have emerging markets ETFs, specific country ETFs that would allow you to invest in South Korea, Japan, India, and China. Those four companies represent over 75% of the non-US market share for consumer electronics. If you are a Sectors Made Simple member and you're interested to learn more about how you can get involved outside of just the US domestic market, I recommend you take a look at our March 16th webinar, in which we talked about foreign markets and how getting started with some of those can be incredibly simple. Ticker symbols for those, I can definitely go through some of them. It really depends on what you're trying to look for, though, because those are not just technology companies. They're going to invest in the largest companies from these countries, regardless of if they're consumer electronics or anything else. And I felt that that was a little outside the scope of today's webinar. If there's one spot in specific that you're interested about, shoot me an email and we can chat about it. Otherwise, that webinar also has all of the resources to help you find ETFs in the markets that you're looking for. So we've now talked about what these companies are and aren't, and the key players in them. The last thing that I want to talk about is why you should care. Besides the fact that it's really convenient to be able to tell your smart assistant to turn on your TV and to turn on your oven and to find you recipes and the funniest cat pictures. Just anecdotal. I've never actually had my assistant find me cat pictures. But that's why I care. Why should you care? Yes, there are no ETFs that directly invest into consumer electronics. The closest thing that I could find in the US is an Internet of Things ETF called SNSR. SNSR does track and purchase IoT companies, but not just in the US, they do look at the global index. But the most important thing, and why I wanted to share this all today, is that it's going to continue growing. IoT is expected to be one of the fastest growing industries in the next 5 years. The availability of these products will continue to increase. The prevalence of IoT will continue to increase. And yes, IoT is the technology side of it. The assistants like That Thing, Alexa, and Siri are all the middleman. Consumer electronics is the physical side. It is what we touch and use, or what the technology helps us to control. As this technology becomes cheaper, more available, and we find more uses for it, expect for these companies to continue to grow. Expect some of these other companies, such as Sony. Sony is not headquartered in the United States, but it is publicly traded in the US market. So it is very possible that other companies become listed on the New York Stock Exchange or other major US exchanges. So now you know a little bit more about what Fujitsu does, what Panasonic does, what Nikon does. And then the last point is that last week we talked quite a bit about semiconductors and how the semiconductor market has suffered as a result not only of COVID, but as a result of everything going on in the world, as well as our increased demand for technology. As the semiconductor issue starts to become something in the rearview mirror, expect for IoT and expect for consumer electronics to become a bigger and bigger industry as more and more devices become connected. Google, do you have anything to say? The silent treatment. I like it. Let's go and look a little bit at some of these companies that we're talking about when we say consumer electronics. And to do that, we're going to use good old FinViz. And because there is no option for SNSR is an ETF. Because we have no option for a consumer electronics industry, let's talk about some options that we do have. If we want, say, ignore everything else, all I want to do is invest in consumer electronics, and I want to do it today. I'll show you a couple things you can do. But while I'm doing this, please ask me questions about this. If anyone has any questions about spreadsheets made simpler, ask me those as well. Today is the last day to sign up for those. So I'm here to answer any questions or issues you have with that. But let's go and look together at the consumer electronics sector. Subsector, my apologies. To do that, we're going to click here on groups, and we're going to go down to industry technology. And if we go down here, we are going to see consumer electronics. Oh, hey, it's the strongest sector this month, or this week. It's second behind solar this month. So here we see 16 companies within this one industry. So FinViz only tracks 16, to give you an idea. So within those 16, we have obvious companies such as Apple, iRobot, who's the manufacturer of Roomba, LG, Sonos, Sony, Vizio. But then there's others in here that you may not be as familiar with, but that doesn't mean that they're not large companies. We see multiple companies. We see here 2.56 billion, 1.66 billion, 1 billion, 650 million. We're talking huge, huge, huge companies. So really, what we're getting here is not small cap companies. We're still looking at very, very, very large size companies with a significant amount of investing around it. So that's one way we can find companies within this sector. Angelica, I registered for the classes, but I cannot find the link confirmation. I will resend you that link confirmation after the webinar. Let me just write that down, and I will take care of that. Yeah, I will resend you that confirmation link. Let me just write something. Okay. So now say you found all of this, and this is great, but I want to invest in an ETF. I don't want to deal with companies. I just want to invest in ETFs. Let's take Sonos, for example. I want to find an ETF that trades Sonos. To do that, we can go to etfdb.com, and instead of searching for a sector, we can search for the ticker name. And, oh, it didn't give it to us. Let me use Apple as an example, and then I'll show you how we can do everything else. So here, the top result is companies and ETFs that list Apple. So here you can find ETFs that contain Apple. But let's go back here and let's see if we can get holdings. There we go. There it is. So if we go here to the etfdb.com screener and go down to holdings, We should be, oh, they moved it. Oh. See, this is what happens when they update things. I look silly. Let's go to etf.com. Let's try this. Is etf.com going to let me actually do this? There we go. Here we go. So, etf.com lets you search for a ticker symbol and find ETFs that contain that sector. How much do they contain? Well, here we go. Here we see Roundhill Streaming Services and Technology, Invesco, Consumer Cyclicals, Global Beta Rising Stars. Some of these are related to technology, while others are not. But clicking in, it gives us an idea of companies that are investing in some of these different companies. We can see here, Consumer Cyclicals Momentum. This is another ETF. All of these are ETFs that would let you buy in and will trade some of these companies that you're looking for. Let's try another. Let's try Turtle Beach. $42 ETFs. So we see here, you can sort by how many shares do these own. What's the largest percent allocation? Percent allocation is how big of their holdings is this one thing. So here we see other things that aren't just technology. Some may be broad index, like the Russell 2000. Others are going to be a little bit more tailored, like esports and digital entertainment. While others are just going to look at the size of company, such as micro, small, mid, or large cap. Again, the biggest downside of something like consumer electronics is that there is no consumer electronics sector. ETF. There is no consumer electronics ETFs. There is no consumer electronics spider fund. We kind of need to do some of the work for ourselves. But with that, we have the ability, using technology like FinViz and like etf.com, to still find opportunities in other areas with these companies. But it's also a matter of, this is today. This sector will continue to grow as time goes on. Consumer electronics is not going anywhere. It is going to continue to be one of the fastest growing one of the fastest growing industries worldwide. Because a lot of that market is not in the US. It is in Asia. And a lot of these companies are producing some incredible technology that allows us to connect ourselves to the digital world that much simpler. So, whereas last week we talked about an industry that is performing very, I would say, volatile through the ups and downs of the microprocessor shortage. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about a sector that is not as well established, but is growing and will continue to grow. Next week, we'll go to the opposite end to see a conservative sector that has been around for a very long time, probably will be around for a lot longer, and is the epitome of slow yet consistent growth. So that is all I have for you all today for the Subsector Spotlight. With the rest of the time, I want to talk a little bit about spreadsheets made simpler and answer any more questions people have regarding those, and then answer some questions that I've gotten over email. For those that aren't familiar, or just to provide a summary, Spreadsheets Made Simpler is a series that I will be doing that will be 12 one-hour webinars in which I will teach you not the basics. The basics you can find, we have a video series on our YouTube channel already to teach you the basics of spreadsheets. This is not meant for beginners. This is meant for anyone who's watched those videos or already has an understanding of Google Sheets and is ready to start doing something more with it. I'm not going to teach you the basics. I'm going to teach you to do something real with it. Google Sheets allows you to create incredible tools for anything from personal spending to mortgage and amortization tables to, as we will build together, entire watch lists for companies where you plug in a single company and it will give you all of the data for that company. Let's just do an example together, shall we? Because we've talked a little bit today about some of our companies in this sector. Let's grab a couple of those. Let's grab GoPro and see how it does on Be a Profit. 5. It's got pretty low return on equity, and it's not very close to its 52-week high. Okay, let's try another one. iRobot. Sometimes the data sources take a little bit to load, but we'll see those start to populate. That one has 4. Let's try LG. LPL. 5. So you can plug in companies and in real time get up-to-date data. How up-to-date? Quite literally, as soon as it's available, we have it. We can pull data from places like FinViz, Fidelity, Stock Charts. Stock Charts doesn't like us too much. But we can pull data from all sorts of places, and when we can't find data, we can build it ourselves. We wanted to make Atmosphere, so guess what? I couldn't find a good calculation for it online. I made one. So this is what you will create. This right here, you will leave the classes not just with this. Yes, I will give it to you at the end, but I will also teach you step by step how to build this. The best part about it, all of it will have checkpoints. Every class will learn a new piece of information and add it. And we'll also have worksheets to help you stay up to date and test your knowledge of the material. It is not mandatory to do the homework, and if you miss a class or if you just want to continue with us live, you can take the version of this that we are up to, download that, and continue, so then you can go back later and catch up or whatever you'd like to do. You will never be punished because you were a day behind or whatever. Jonathan, will you teach the Excel class again in the future? I want to do more in the future, yes. However, the beauty of what this class is, yes, you will leave with this exact spreadsheet. But the best part is you'll know how to build it. So if you ever decide that instead of EPS growth quarter over quarter, you wanted to do EPS growth year over year, you would know what to do to change that. You would have the knowledge and the resources to make this your watch list, your screener. FinViz screener is great, but you're choosing between what they give you options for. Here, the options are unlimited, and when we can't find the option, we build it. So that's what I want to teach you to do. These classes, again, there's 12 of them, and it will be every Monday starting on this upcoming Monday, July 12th. There will be 12 of them, and the registration cost for these classes is $400 for the 12 classes, all of the worksheets and checkpoints, as well as the recordings for the future. Someone asked a question. Can we build one spreadsheet for tracking the companies to see how much we lost or win? Yeah, so we definitely can do that. I don't know if we'll be able to cover that in the Spreadsheets Made Simpler series, but it's definitely a webinar I can do here in the future, yeah. But again, it's not just about giving you a spreadsheet. It's not just about teaching you a lesson. It's about giving you both. I want to give you the information and then show you how that information can be used to build a tool. Do I have any advice to start the classes? Yes. Understand the classes will not be easy. I don't want them to be easy. Yes, they will be easy to understand and to keep up with, but the information in them will not be basic stuff. We're talking about real skill building here because I want to give you real value. I don't want to just give you something that's cool or good to know for the one time you can use it in the future. No, I want to teach you skills that with those skills you can build anything. This spreadsheet right here is me taking what I know about Google Sheets and trying to build something that I personally wanted. I want to help you do the same thing. And if you ever have questions, so back to what I was saying, these classes will not be easy, but we will cover the information over and over again. We can always slow down if people feel that we're going too quickly, but everyone can do it. It is not impossible. You don't need more software or anything. All you need is Google Sheets, some patience, and the willingness to learn. And I promise you, regardless of if you understand every little bit and piece by the end, you will have this spreadsheet to work with. If you're interested in signing up, here is the sign up link for those webinars. Again, the cost is $400 for the webinar. However, for Sectors Made Simple members, you will receive a 50% discount on the cost of the registration. So if you are a Sectors Made Simple member, you can register for $200. Just shoot me an email saying that you want to sign up, and I can help you get set up with the members discount for that. Registrations close tonight. I will be continuing to check my emails, so if you have an email, please send it to me, but registrations close tonight. So this is your last chance to get in on these classes. Otherwise, you can see the recordings or purchase the recordings at a later date. I'm incredibly excited because this is something that is not just fun. I have gotten jobs solely because of what I knew and could do with spreadsheets. It is a valuable tool for investors. It is an amazing resource for students, and it is an incredibly valuable skill for people who are looking at jobs in any industry. Many people expect and want Excel and spreadsheet knowledge. So, in these classes, I will help you to build that knowledge. What time does registration close tonight? Midnight Pacific time. How will we access the Google Sheets classes? They will be on Zoom. So we will have a Zoom link that you will join the classes through. If you have not received that Zoom link already, if you registered and you have not gotten that link, send me an email and we'll make sure that we get that all sorted for you. But that is all the time we have for today. Again, if you have any questions, please send me an email or send us an email at support@sectorsmadesimple.com. I'm incredibly excited to begin this class series with you all on Monday, and it will not take away from the webinars that we continue to do for Sectors Made Simple. So members, I'll see you back for a webinar on Tuesday, and everyone else will see you for another Subsector Spotlight next Friday, where we break into the automotive industry and talk about how one of the strongest and oldest industries still continues to dominate today. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Have an amazing weekend, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Take care, everyone.